Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's begin today's session of comprehensive news analysis with the first article by Krishna Kumar, who is a former director of the NCRT. In this article, the author talks about the gap in the education that the children have faced during the COVID 19 pandemic, how the classes going online have affected the students, especially in the poor families across the country and especially in the rural areas. The author here says that it is important for the government to take positive steps in this direction and bridge the gap that the students have faced due to this pandemic. The author starts by saying that it is the government's responsibility to help the families, especially in terms of child's education and child's health. It is the government's responsibility to ensure that the best of resources are allocated to the students, especially in these areas. That is because a good society can't allow discrimination in terms of education levels just because one family was able to afford better education and the other family was not. Although the right to education has been a game changer for India by increasing the enrollment levels to a very large extent, however, the gains made by this law have been offset by the COVID 19 pandemic. And that is why there is a need for a new beginning in education in India. As you know, when the pandemic began, the Prime Minister gave a slogan at the time of announcing a complete lockdown: Jaan hai to jahan hai. Means if we have life, we have everything. But we soon realized the fact that just surviving would not do us any good. Apart from surviving, we also have to focus on bringing our lives back on track. And the same has to be done with education also. A lot of recent surveys have suggested that pandemic has deeply impacted education in India. Although most schools and colleges switched to online teaching mode, this led to an even bigger divide between the students belonging to different backgrounds. Just imagine this. Even in the middle class families, one family usually has one laptop. Now, at a time when the parents are working from home and the students are attending classes from home, who would actually have that one laptop? Would the parent have it for his or her office work, or would the student have it to attend classes online? Not just this, availability of broadband in India also is not a universal phenomena. And there's a large disparity depending upon where you live and which state do you belong to. Not just the online lessons, the author here says that the students during the COVID 19 pandemic faced other challenges as well. For example, because the children now had to stay home compulsorily, they were exposed to much more domestic violence that usually they would not have seen. They were forced to spend prolonged hours in front of TV or other digital devices, especially amongst the boys, leading to a kind of addiction to digital devices, which is now hampering their growth. While all the states have faced this problem, the state of Tamil Nadu has formed a committee under the chairmanship of Professor R. Ramanujan to prepare a 3-year plan of how to bring the student at par with his or her grade level and bridge the gap that have been formed during the COVID 19 pandemic. One of the major challenges will be how to force the students now away from the digital devices, which is hampering their mental and physical health. In a country like India, where we don't have enough doctors, enough judges, enough teachers, or engineers, the onus is on our education system to be so robust that we can have a constant supply of these professionals in the coming decades. And that is why the governments can't ignore the question of education. Yes, we have to focus on economy. Yes, we have to focus on jobs. But in all these debates, the question of education cannot take a back seat. The other thing that happened during the COVID 19 pandemic was that a lot of students were shifted from a private school to a government school since the parents could not afford the fee of private school due to lack of jobs. Not just this, many private schools were even shut down because they were not getting enough fee from the students. That again has put a lot of pressure on the government education infrastructure. And the interesting part is that this is not just a problem that India faced. It was a worldwide phenomena, so most developing countries face this issue. UNESCO recently published a report titled No Teacher, No Class that was published by experts in India. The report says that India is facing a shortfall of at least 1 million school teachers right now. The recommendations given in the report include improving the terms of employment for teachers in both private and public schools. Second, value the autonomy of the teachers, allow them to be much more independent inside the classroom, recruit more teachers at all levels. Also, rebuild the entire system because that is the need of the hour, especially in India. Now, if you go beyond this article, there are a lot of reports out there in the public platform that highlight the disparity between the students belonging to different backgrounds. For example, the ASA report, that is the annual status of education report by Pratham, which is considered to be a very important source of education data in India, tells us about the percentage of children having access to smartphones. It says that amongst students who were studying in classes 1 and 2, only 65% of them had smartphone at home, but they only had access to that smartphone 20% of the times. Means the one smartphone in the house where they could attend the classes was usually with the parents. And this disparity can be seen in all the classes. Even the students from classes 9th to 12th, although 72.6% of them had a smartphone at home, they did not really have access to it most of the times. One other aspect that we are overlooking in this particular situation is that not just the students, the teachers equally had a hard time in coping up with this pandemic. Most of the teachers in these schools were not very familiar with the technology. It was very difficult for them to conduct classes online, and they also had to take help from their people in the family. All this data highlights that the students as well as the teachers had a really hard time during the COVID 19 pandemic, and the government needs to take steps in order to make the situation better. There is also data of February 2021 that talks about the resources that the students had in India. This map shows that amongst the low income households, not even 10% of them had Wi Fi at their homes, and only about 60% of them had smartphones, while the number is much better in high income families. Similarly, for students studying in government schools, the number of smartphones that they had was much lesser as compared to those for students who are studying in private schools, which again leads to a gap in terms of the education that they were receiving during the lockdown. Now, the government of India also, on its behalf, has taken certain initiatives to bridge this gap of education. For instance, the Diksha portal is a good beginning. It's a digital platform which has a good quality content for school education in all schools and union territories. The content on the platform can be accessed by the students as per their local need. The government has also earmarked the Swayam Prabha TV channel per classes from class 1 to 12th for one class, one channel to give them proper learning. Radio and CBSE podcasts have also been used in the form of Shiksha Vani to provide education to the students. And not just this, the government has also initiated Mano Darpan, that is a platform offering psychological support to students, teachers, and families for their mental health during the COVID 19 outbreak. The next article that we have talks about the tragic loss that India suffered with the demise of India's first Chief of Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat. Although it's a small article and does not give a lot of information about the accident or the initiatives taken by the general, but it underlines the fact that the helicopter that was ferrying these soldiers is one of the top line helicopters that India has, and top military leaders use that helicopter. Thus, there is an urgent need to conduct investigation into what went wrong before we can use this helicopter on a large scale once again. The article also says that the CDS is an extremely important position and the government should not delay the appointment of the new CDS. While the CDS post was first recommended to be set up after the Kargil war in the year 2000, it took almost 2 decades for the government to actually appoint a CDS. The author also says that the government must keep in mind the principle of seniority while choosing the new CDS to ensure that there is proper coordination between the chief of all the services. Now, ever since this tragic incident happened, the one thing you would have heard in the news multiple times is that the CDS was playing a key role in government's efforts to establish an integrated theater command. So we thought of discussing what exactly do we mean by integrated theater command? What is the need to set up such a command and where do we stand right now? In very simple terms, this is a military structure under which assets of army, air force and navy will be combined together and put under the command of one single official who will be a three-star general. Right now, the decisions of the Army, Air Force, and Navy are taken separately by their heads. But when a country is involved in a particular war, we usually need to use all these forces. And for a better coordination amongst all these, there should be a common theater command. That is a suggestion. Right now, India has different commands for different services. We have 19 commands in total, including 14 geographical commands, 3 functional commands, and 2 joint commands, including the Andaman and Nicobar command. Many countries around the world, including US, Russia, and China, already have a system of an integrated theater command. In fact, China has its own Western Theater Command that looks into its defense with respect to India. It was America that first came up with this idea. Now, India does have a tri service theater command sort of a thing, that is the Andaman and Nicobar command. That is, this particular command called the ANC has joint collaboration of all the Indian armed forces and is based at Port Blair and covers India's interest in Southeast Asia. The plan of the government is that there should be a total of 5 theater commands in India. One Northern Land Command that will look into Jammu Kashmir, Ladakh, and the central sector. The Western Land Theater that will be focusing specially on Pakistan. Eastern Land Theater, the Maritime Theater Command, and the Air Defense Command. CDS General Bipin Rawat was playing a key role in realizing this dream of the government and was taking key steps in this regard. Setting up of such an integrated theater command would lead to much better efficiency, cost effectiveness, and rationalization of the command structure that will come in extremely handy in times of a war. Now, there are some concerns with respect to this idea as well. For example, of the 3 services that we have, Army, Navy, and Air Force, it is said that while Army and Navy are on board with this idea, the Air Force is not really happy that its resources will have to be shared. You have to understand that the Indian Air Force already is short of resources and they don't want to dedicate their handful of resources to a common theater command. They think that their control over their resources is extremely necessary for them. There are also many experts that say that the way that Indian armed forces are structured, we have been able to fight against any challenges that we have faced. So there is not really a need to have a common theater command. Not just this, the 3 forces have a different kind of a culture. So bringing them all together under one single command may not be as easy as it sounds on the paper. It would also require a lot of funding and it won't be an easy process to go ahead with. That is why this idea, which has been in talks since the year 2000, has just been delayed over and over. The next news story we will talk about is that the Lok Sabha passed 2 bills yesterday that allowed the government to extend the tenure of the director of the CBI and the chief of the Enforcement Directorate. Currently, they have a 2 year tenure. Now, this law allows the government to extend their tenure 1 year at a time up to a total of 5 years. As you would know, the government had already brought an ordinance for this effect. These bills now take away the ordinance and convert it into a permanent law. Many opposition MPs said that the government was wrong in doing this, and this particular law was specially passed keeping in mind the fact that tenure of ED chief SK Mishra was over and the government wanted to extend it for its own convenience. The opposition said that the government should not use its power to control these 2 organizations. The government, on the other hand, said that the CBI chief is not just appointed by the government. The CBI chief is chosen by a high level panel in which there is the Prime Minister, Chief Justice of India, And not just these, there is also the leader of opposition in this particular panel. So the opposition must not assume that the government is forcing any appointment without consulting anyone else. Now, there are a lot of concerns over this particular bill, which we had discussed earlier as well. These bills, as I said, replace the ordinance that was brought last month. So, last month, the 2 year tenure of ED Chief SK Mishra was over. Just a few days before the 2 year tenure was coming to an end, the government brought an ordinance saying that from now onwards, we can extend the tenure of the ED chief 1 year at a time up to a maximum of 5 years if we like the working of the ED or the CBI chief. Thus, two laws were amended. One for the CBI director, that is the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act, and second for the ED director, that was the Central Vigilance Commission Act of 2003. Earlier, when the government had introduced these ordinances, there were petitions filed in the Supreme Court against it, saying that the government would increase its control over these two authorities by this law. The petition had said that if the government really wants to extend the tenure to 5 years, they should do it all together and not just 1 year at a time, because that will force the director and the chief to work in accordance with the government if they have to extend their job. Thus, it would go against the concept of their professional independence. Secondly, there is no proper criteria given by the government on the basis of which their tenure will be extended. It's a very vague reference, and that is why it gives a free hand to the government to extend the tenure of some officials which they think are favorable to them. Like any other government decision, there are pros and cons with this also. The good part is that the 2 year tenure of the CBI chief was anyways considered as pretty short. In US, for example, the FBI chief gets a 10-year term. So we must have at least a 5 year tenure to allow the director to bring in important changes in these organizations and carry on investigations for a longer tenure. Because usually, when the 2 year period is over and the new director comes in, he or she wants to make a name for himself and takes up new cases rather than continuing with the cases of his or her predecessor, because everyone wants to take the credit for solving new cases. Secondly, the power to give extension will not just be with the government alone. Extension will be approved by a committee having the Prime Minister, Chief Justice of India, and the leader of opposition. So, the allegation by the opposition that the government will control these organizations is not entirely correct. The bad part, however, is, as we discussed earlier, just giving them extensions 1 year at a time does not really sound good. If the government is happy with their working, they should directly extend their tenure from 2 years to 5 years. Secondly, the government has been misusing the powers of ordinance. Article 123 of the Constitution says that the ordinance making power should be used only when there is an urgent need for a law. What was the urgent need to bring in an ordinance for this matter is the question of the opposition. The Supreme Court also in the DC Wadhwa case has said that the power to promulgate ordinance is essentially only for extraordinary situations and should not be used for political gains. But this is what has happened in case of extension of the tenure of these two people. The next article that we have is essentially an interview of two very well-known public health experts taking their views about the need for a booster dose of COVID vaccine, keeping in mind the spread of Omicron variant across the world, including India. The gist of this conversation is that the authors here say that there is not enough evidence till now to say that the booster dose will be needed. Rather than focusing on the need of a booster dose, we should focus on covering the entire population with the first two shots of the COVID vaccine. The Union Health Minister recently said that no decision on the booster shots has been taken till now. We are waiting for scientific recommendations before making up our minds. And India's priority is to fully vaccinate all the adults first and then think about the booster shot. The National Technical Advisory Group on Immunization, which is advising the government on vaccination decisions, has not recommended any booster dose for any population in the country. The authors here say that it is a very tempting decision for any government to make. At a time when thousands and lakhs of people are still dying of COVID every single day across the world, there is a need to cover as many people with vaccination as possible. However, there is no proper scientific evidence to suggest that the two doses are not enough and the booster dose will do the job. As you can see here, the authors say that there is no reliable evidence that the booster dose will provide increased protection against the COVID 19 pandemic, including the Omicron variant. There is an expectation that the booster dose will proportionately increase the protection against transmission. However, that has still not been proven for the vaccines that we are using in India. Yes, there are studies that tell us that the antibody levels go down over a period of time, a few months after you had your vaccine shot, but they still protect us against severe disease and hospitalization. So there is no question of resorting to a booster dose. Just because our antibody levels are going down after a few months, that does not mean that the booster shot is the way forward for us in India. There has been a study for the Pfizer vaccine, especially, which is used in US and Europe, which tells that the booster shot is increasing the protection. But the same study has not proven anything for Covaxin or Covishield that we are using in India. Just because we have a new Omicron variant, that does not mean that the booster shot will be more helpful against it. The single minded focus of the government, as per the authors, should be to complete the primary immunization schedule of the two doses of the entire population, because we still have a large number of people in India who have not taken even a single dose. The authors also say that since the government now has a big stock of the two vaccines, we should focus on reinitiating the vaccine Maitri. That is because the new variants will keep on coming up until the entire world's population is vaccinated against the COVID 19 virus. So, the solution to fight against the new variant is not to give a booster shot to people who already have had the vaccine, but to cover those people who have been unfortunate enough not to have even a single dose of vaccine just because their governments can't afford this. Now, the situation about the booster dose is different in different countries around the world. Let me give you some examples. In the US recently, the government announced that the booster shot will be available for those above 65 years of age and in certain categories of young adults also. Although there are 6.5 crore people in US who are still unvaccinated, but the government is moving towards a booster dose. Many other countries in Europe also have approved booster dose, including UK. Australia also did the same recently, and so has Canada. But India still remains undecided on the question of the booster dose. Now, there are many experts who are bringing in the question of ethics as well. As I said, many poor countries around the world, especially the African countries, are still facing a shortage of vaccines. While on one hand, in developed nations such as the US, the vaccines are overflowing, but people are not ready to take the shots. In many nations of Africa, where people are lining up to take the vaccines, there is not enough stock available. In that case, shouldn't the developed nations export their excess vaccine to the African nations and the sub Saharan nations rather than giving a third shot to their own population? Why not use those vaccines to give a first shot to those countries who are not able to afford it? Because we have to understand that the world is so connected that irrespective of wherever a new variant of the virus emerges, it is just a matter of a few weeks that it will be spread across the world. So, a better way to protect ourselves against new viruses is to give primary doses to as many people as possible across the world and not to just keep pushing in vaccines into people who are from the developed world just because their governments have many more vaccines available. So, this question of ethics also still remains unresolved. Also, remember that the WHO has not officially recommended any booster dose for the COVID vaccine till now. Any country that is approving this, such as the US and the European countries, are doing it on the basis of their own studies. The next article that we have here for you is about a recent study in the Lancet that talks about ways to curb suicides, especially in India. The article tells us that the suicide rates amongst Indian girls and women continue to be twice the global rate. Although it has dropped down in the last decade or so, it is still extremely high. Not just this, the number of youth who are committing suicide in India in the age group of 15 to 39 also is extremely large. India, unfortunately, reports the highest number of suicide deaths in the world. This is just the official numbers, and the unofficial numbers can be much higher than this. The most common methods, as per the article, are hanging, medicine overdose, pesticides, poisoning, etc. And the reasons pushing people towards this extreme step is depression, alcohol disorder, social factors, and cultural factors. This Lancet paper says that the government, apart from offering counseling to the people, should also constitute a task force for suicide prevention research in the country. Now, the data for suicides in India is compiled by National Crime Record Bureau, that is the NCRB. As per the NCRB, this is the suicide data of the year 2020. The number of suicides has increased as compared to 2019 amongst almost all the groups. The largest number of suicides were seen amongst the daily wage earners, followed by housewives, other people, self employed people, students, farmers, etc. Now, I also have a lot of data to share for suicide numbers in India. In 2020, the number of people suicides was over 1.53 lakh, which is a 10% increase from 2019. Maharashtra, amongst all the states, fared the worst, which had over 4,000 suicides in the farm sector. Realizing this problem, the government has taken certain steps to help people suffering from suicidal thoughts. For example, Mental Healthcare Act 2017 was passed that provides mental healthcare services for people suffering from mental illness. The Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment also launched a toll-free helpline called Kiran, where people facing anxiety issues, depression, etc., can call up and talk to an expert. And as we discussed earlier in the video, the government also has a Manodarpan initiative to provide psychological support to students, teachers, etc., who are suffering from mental health issues. Suicides remain a big problem worldwide and not just in India. In fact, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals also talk about reducing the global suicide mortality rate by one third by 2030. However, this goal seems to be pretty far as compared to what the current numbers are. Right now, only 38 nations around the world have a national suicide prevention strategy. Even before the pandemic year, the suicide rates around the world were extremely heartbreaking. The global standard rate for suicide is about 9 people per 1 lakh population for 2019, and many of them are unfortunately young people. The WHO also has its own guidelines for prevention of suicide, which is called the New Live Life Guidelines. These include limiting access to means of suicide, such as hazardous pesticides and firearms, which people use to commit suicide, educating the media on reporting of suicides, providing socio emotional life skills, especially to the adolescents, identifying people who are suffering from suicidal thoughts, etc. These are the articles that we wanted to discuss from the Hindu newspaper today. Now, a couple of practice questions. Number one, urgent steps must be taken to offset the study loss that children faced during the COVID 19 pandemic. Suggest such measures that can be taken by the authorities at the earliest to bring the students to their grade level. Second, in light of the recent reports highlighting a high rate of suicide amongst females in India, suggest measures to curb the rising cases of suicides in the country. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video.